Välkomna allesammans till Kungliga Vetenskapsakademin. Idag har vi fattat beslut om att utdela Sveriges Riksbanks pris i ekonomisk vetenskap till Alfred Nobels minne. Jag heter Göran Hansson och är akademins ständige sekreterare. Och med mig här framme har jag idag professor Ellingsen som är ordförande i priskommittén för ekonomipriset och professor Jakob Svensson som är ledamot av kommittén. Welcome to the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. It is now time to announce the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel. The prize is funded by donations from the Central Bank of Sweden and has been awarded since 1969. I am Göran Hansson, Secretary General of the Academy, and with me on the podium are two members of the prize committee. Its chairman, Professor Ellingsen, and Professor Jakob Svensson, who is also a member of the committee. I will start by reading the announcement. We will hear presentations from my colleagues on the panel. We hope to have a laureate with us on the phone line, and of course we look forward to your questions in English or in Swedish. Ready? Årets pris handlar om konsumtion i stort och smått. This year's prize is about consumption, great and small. Kungliga Vetenskapsakademin har beslutat utdela Sveriges Riksbanks pris i ekonomisk vetenskap till Alfred Nobels minne för år 2015 till Angus Deaton för hans analys av konsumtion, fattigdom och välfärd. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has today decided to award the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel to Angus Deaton for his analysis of consumption, poverty and welfare. We were hoping to display the citation on the screen, but apparently something is wrong with the technique here. So I think I'll read the citation again. The prize goes to Angus Deaton for his analysis of consumption, poverty and welfare. Professor Deaton is from Scotland originally, but is now working since many years at Princeton University in New Jersey in the United States. Let's see if we can get him on the screen. Yes. Here we have Professor Deaton on your screen. And with that, I think I'll hand over the word to the chairman of the prize committee, Professor Ellingsen, who will make some introductory remarks about this year's prize. Tore, please.
Thank you. Science often faces the question, can we understand large-scale patterns without detailed information about small-scale processes? In economic science, we used to hope that the answer was, yes, we can. Historically, we lacked data about choices at the level of the individual and the household. In order to make sense of our macro-level data, we therefore conducted our analysis on the presumption that all people are essentially alike and face the same kind of constraints. For example, poor households were presumed to behave in roughly the same way as rich households, only with less money at their disposal. Today, in large part due to the work of Angus Deaton and his collaborators, we not only understand the limitation of that approach, we also have the data and the skills that are required to do better. My colleague Jakob Svensson will now offer a brief introduction to Angus Deaton's most important contributions. Please, Jakob.
Thank you very much. So let's see if this works. Yes. So the study of consumption has been and continues to be at the center of economic research. And there are several reasons for that. First, consumption is an essential determinant of human welfare. For some, actually, it might be the most crucial determinant. Second, consumption data or expenditure data forms the basis for measuring poverty in many developing countries. Third, aggregate consumption forms the largest component of aggregate demand in many countries and thus accounts for much of the time variation in economic activity over the business cycle. And fourth, the flip side of consumption is savings. So once you have determined income and determined consumption, you also have determined savings. And through the supply of capital, then, you have influenced long-run investments. But consumption is a complex, understanding and measuring consumption is a complex endeavor. However, thanks to the work of Angus Deaton, we today have a much deeper understanding of a number of core issues related to consumption. So Angus Deaton receives this year's prize in economic sciences for 3 related achievements. First, his work on so-called demand systems. Second, for his work linking consumption and income at the aggregate as well as at the individual level. And finally, for his work on measuring and understanding living standards and poverty in developing countries. And I thought I'll take a few moments then to go through these 3 core contributions. Starting with demand system. And let's start with an example. Let's think of a government that plans to increase the VAT on food. Presumably, or hopefully, we would like that government then to find out which social groups will gain and which social group will lose, and how large are the gains and how large are the losses. But in order to determine that, we need to determine how consumption of various goods and services change in response to the reform. And in order to determine that, we need to know how prices and incomes and changes in prices and incomes affect individuals' consumption decisions. That is, we need to estimate a so-called demand system. Research on demand system has a long history in economics, but it was not until 1980 and the introduction of the so-called almost ideal demand system by Angus Deaton and co-authors that we had the first system that managed to accurately capture real-world demand patterns. So this system and later improvements to it are nowadays standard tool to study the effects of economic policy, but also an important tool in research to understand, for instance, how to compare living standards across countries or within countries over time. Second core contribution deals with the links between consumption and income. And let's start with again with an example. Think about fiscal policy or stabilization policy. Then traditionally, our focus has been on aggregate variables. However, the process through which these aggregate variables is determined actually takes place at the individual level. And failure to take that into account and estimate models at the aggregate level can actually yield the wrong results. This, in essence, is the so-called Deaton paradox. But Deaton not only uncovered a paradox, he also pointed towards a solution to that paradox. And as the picture here illustrated, the key to understanding this paradox is to look closer at the process of average or aggregate income. Because it is in fact so that incomes of individuals fluctuate in a very different way than average income. At some given time period, some individuals get a positive income shock, some other individuals get a negative income shock, and when you look at the average or you aggregate these numbers, most of these changes averages away. So the solution or resolving the Deaton paradox is to study consumption at the individual level, the relationship between consumption and income at the individual level, and thereafter aggregate up to the national level. And this insight, that is the importance of studying individual behavior in order to understand important aggregate outcomes, has been an insight that has had long and lasting influence in modern economic macroeconomics. Final contribution deals with measuring living standards and poverty in developing countries. And again, let me give you an example. So in principle, it's an easy task to measure poverty in a low-income country. You start by determining a poverty line, and then you simply count the number or the share of individuals with either an income level or a consumption level below that poverty line. In practice, however, it is a difficult problem. So while we might have good expenditure data at our disposal, we typically do not know the prices and the quality of the goods that these households have consumed. So in work that have had a large impact on actual policy, poverty measurement in many developing countries, Deaton showed a way to overcome this problem. In other work, he has focused more on understanding world poverty, and among other things, he has showed how to account for the increase of nearly 500 million poor, as reported in one of the World Bank's latest update. And more generally, Deaton has showed that our measure of world poverty at a given point in time is very sensitive to the assumption made to come up with these numbers. Finally, let me say a few words about the overall themes and impact. As I hopefully have shown, Deaton's research spans many different aspects of consumption, but there are also a number of common denominators. One is his desire to bridge theory and data. A second, as the picture there tries to illustrate, is his desire to bridge individual behavior and aggregate outcomes. That is, in order to understand important aggregate outcomes, we need to look closer and understand individual behavior. And these insights have had a large influence on microeconomics, macroeconomics, and maybe in particular development economics. His research has also had a large influence on practical policy making. Finally, a few words about the laureate himself then. Angus Deaton was born in 1945. He's still 69 years old in Edinburgh, UK. He's an American and a British citizen. He received his PhD in 1974 from University of Cambridge. And he has, since 1983, been a professor of economics and international affairs at Princeton University. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jakob. Let's see if we can have Professor Deaton with us on the phone. Hello, Professor Deaton. No?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, good morning, Professor Deaton. This is Göran Hansson at the Academy of Sciences in Stockholm again.
Thank you. I've been listening to you and your colleagues.
Great. We are now in the midst of a press conference here in the session hall of the Academy. And I'm sure the journalists would like to ask you some questions. Are you ready for them?
I'll try my best. Thank you.
Very good. So let's see. I think Kristina Lagerström from Swedish television.
Thank you. Congratulations to the prize, Mr. Deaton.
Thank you very much.
I wonder, you are rewarded, among other things, for your work on gender discrimination within the family in developing countries. How would you say that your work could address this problem and help?
Like a lot of my work, I'm mostly concerned with trying to measure the extent of these things. And I was mostly concerned with looking at whether little boys and little girls are treated differently. And we certainly found a little bit of that, but I'm not sure that this measurement really established exactly what was going on. And I think more direct measures are probably better.
Thank you.
Okay. More questions for Professor Deaton? Yes, a question over there. Can we have a microphone?
Yes, hello, Mr. Deaton, and congratulations. My name is Louise Andren-Maten. I'm from the Swedish newspaper, Svenska Dagbladet. I would like to hear your ideas on the current refugee crisis, migrant crisis happening. After all, you have studied poverty and, yeah. So I would like to see, from your point of view, how do you see what is happening at the moment?
Well, I mean, I think that what is happening has its roots in long-distance history, and that what we're seeing now, in some sense, is the result of hundreds of years of unequal development in the rich world, which has left a lot of the world behind. And those people who've been left behind would like a better lives, and that's putting enormous pressure on the border boundaries between the poor world and the rich world. Again, I'm not sure that understanding this leads to a solution for the very difficult problems that are facing Europe right now.
And then I know this is a big question, but from your point of view, do you see anything that could solve the situation?
Well, I think poverty reduction in the poor countries will solve the problem, but it's not going to solve the problem for a very long time. In the short run, sort of stabilizing politically volatile situations and war zones really would help.
Thank you. More questions for Professor Deaton? Yes, over there. The gentleman over there. You'll get a microphone in a second.
My name is Johan Schick, representing the newspaper in Sweden, Dagens Nyheter. Professor Deaton, congratulations. I would like to ask you about extreme poverty that has been decreasing quite a lot in the recent decades. Do you foresee a continuation of that development, or do you think there are any thresholds that are hindering it in the future?
Yes, I do foresee a decrease. I think we've had a remarkable decrease over the last 20 or 30 years, and I do expect that to continue, but like all forecasts, it's extremely dangerous because really bad things can happen. But I would actually, I don't want to sound like a blind optimist, because it's also true that there are enormous numbers of people in the world. The World Bank has just come out with recent estimates of about 700 million people who live in something close to destitution. There's also a tremendous health problem among adults and children. In India, where again there's been a lot of progress, something like half of the children are still way, way undernourished. And so while I expect things to get better, you have to keep remembering that we're not out of the woods yet, and that for many, many people in the world, things are very bad indeed.
Do we have any more questions for Professor Deaton? Yes, right there. Lady in red.
Congratulations, Mr. Deaton. I'm Sufficient Laxasong. I'm from Green Post. Here it said for your analysis of consumption, poverty, and welfare, I'd like you to explain a little bit in the current consuming society, should we consume more to expand the economy, or should people save a little bit or consume according to what their income is? Can you comment on this question? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think it's my role, in spite of this very distinguished prize, to tell people what they should be doing and whether they should be saving more or consuming more. I am not someone who believes that the increase in consumption has been really worthless. I don't think it's a rat race. I think a lot of what we have now are things that make our lives very much better. And I think the problem ahead is not to stop that, but to stop that inflicting damage on other people around the world. And for instance, it's clear that there are huge unsolved problems associated with climate change, for example, and I think the current upward trends in inequality are very worrying in many contexts around the world. So I don't have a simple answer to that, but my general message is, my measurements tend to show that things are getting better, but there's a lot of work still to be done, and the world is not a good place. It's getting better. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Yes, the prize in economic sciences was established already in 1969. Your work is about poverty and welfare. Why do you think that you are awarded now at this point, your field?
Well, I only just found out why this morning. I mean, you have to read the citation. I'm absolutely delighted, and I think that someone, who's concerned with the poor of the world, with how people behave and what makes them, gives them a good life. I'm so delighted, not just for myself, but that this sort of work is being recognized. So that's a wonderful thing.
That's a question you can ask also to the committee members here later on during the press conference. Are there more questions for Professor Deaton? Yes, please, over here. Lady over there. You get the microphone.
Congratulations, Mr. Deaton. My name is Liu Shang from People's Daily. I think your analysis is based on a lot of data, so I would like to ask, how did you collect all the data and how many countries have you covered? Thank you.
Oh gosh, that's a really difficult question. I've collected a little data myself throughout my career, but I've mostly relied on data that have been collected by other people, particularly data by statistical offices around the world, who are the sort of great unsung heroes of our understanding of economics. Is the magnificent work that's been done by statistical offices, especially statistical offices in poor countries who labor under very difficult circumstances in many cases. My own work has focused on many, many countries at various times. I've done a lot of work in the United States. I did a lot of work in Britain. I've spent a lot of my career working on India and a somewhat lesser extent in South Africa. But, for instance, with my good friends at the Gallup organization, I've recently done a lot of work looking all around the world, and they have some wonderful data in looking at well-being all around the planet.
Thank you. The gentleman over there.
Yes, Professor. My name is Tobias. I work for a Swedish news agency here in Sweden. This might be a little bit off topic, but I just want to hear from you your first reaction when you got a call from Stockholm and who you told the great news.
Gosh, I was pretty sleepy. It's hard to remember what I felt like at that time. So I was just delighted. Obviously, like many, many economists, I knew this was a possibility, that in any given year the odds are very, very small, and I was surprised and delighted. And it was wonderful to hear the voices of my friends on the committee.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there more questions for Professor Deaton? If not, I think that was the last question for you. So thank you very much, Professor Deaton, for being with us on the phone today. And congratulations again, and welcome to Stockholm in December.
I look forward to it very much, and thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So now let's move on to questions to the panel. Are there any questions to the panel? Right. Janine Axelsson again.
I'd like to ask, I don't know whether you can, but it's how do you decide, or what is an ideal demanding system?
Who would like?
You want to take that,
Yeah,
Jakob?
very briefly, and An ideal demand system is a system that manages to pick up a lot of variation in the data. Demand systems can help you understand why people are choosing what they're choosing as functions of prices and incomes and maybe many other things like demographic factors. I think that's the core of a good demand system. There are other things that we as economists would like from a demand system, but in essence, in the end, we want to have a system that manages to explain choices people are making.
More questions? If we have provided all the information you needed and satisfied your curiosity, then we'll close this press conference. I know that several of you have requested interviews with prize committee members, and they will commence immediately afterwards. Thank you very much for attending. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.